In my personal opinion, how you interact with flanking is one of the biggest things that can define you as an Overwatch player. You see, when going on a flank, you have way more opportunity to get picks and find impact, which really embodies those solo carry plays that can hard carry you out of a rank that you so desperately want to get out of. That being said, when going on these flanks, you give up positional advantage, making you specifically weak and easy to punish in some aspects. On top of that, the way you interact or stop enemies from flanking can be the other way that you are defined as a player. Whether you're a support or tank or even a DPS yourself, understanding how to stop enemies from flanking, understanding the signs that they will flank, and how you capitalize on the fact that they don't have positional advantage can be all the difference in how you can climb as a player. Every time you go on a flank, whether or not it's successful can directly correlate to your SR gained or SR lost. At the same time, every time an enemy goes on the flank, you can lose a whole game if you're unable to stop them from getting multiple kills in your backline and having tons of uncontested impact. Now, with all this being said, let's jump into this flanking mastery guide so that you can dominate this concept and thus start dominating each and every game of Overwatch that you're playing in. If you've been waiting for the moment to take your Overwatch gameplay to the next level, now's the best time with our GameLeap.com sale where you can get your annual subscription for only $3 a month. If you want to jump in on the action and make yourself that self-actualized best player, definitely take advantage of this amazing opportunity, and I hope to see you there. So the first major question that we really need to address here is, why is flanking so powerful? It seems that the community simultaneously complains about their teammates flanking all the time and feeding, while at the same time getting farmed by enemies that seem to flank and get multiple picks and are this constant pressure into your team that really get implicit value. Now, there's actually a number of reasons why flanking is so powerful. The fact of the element of surprise is a big one, especially with characters that have extremely fast kill times. Think of something like a Widow, a Hanzo, Kree, Roadhog. The reason flanking is so powerful on these characters is you can get first shot on an enemy when they're caught off guard, and by the time the enemy can react to this, you usually can secure a kill, allowing you to either 1, secure more kills on the enemy because the way that they punish you is already dealt with, or 2, it can allow you to get a kill and then easily retreat back to your team in a way that you got a free pick. You basically took a 1v1 matchup against an enemy who wasn't paying attention to your location, so it wasn't a straight up 1v1, it wasn't a fair fight. It's almost like a sucker punch, right? If you're heated with somebody and you just sock them out of nowhere, that's the real world equivalent of a flank in Overwatch. They're not prepared for it, they're not ready for it. It doesn't matter if you're worse mechanically than that player, it doesn't matter if that player has a better matchup against you on paper. If you can burst them down without them knowing or do a lot of damage into them before they even realize your location, then a lot of times you can win a matchup that you had no business winning. And that's why flanking is so powerful. So you might be asking, if flanking is so powerful, then why don't you just do it all the time? And there are actually a lot of risks to flanking. So the biggest risks to flanking is you just die, you just feed. You basically try to go for a play and you get scouted out, you don't execute a flank successfully, and you get punished for it. And Overwatch is a game all about getting punished. You don't want to get punished for plays you make, you want to get punished the least amount, and that's how you consistently climb. That being said, flanking is definitely a tool that you should be using in your arsenal, but knowing when to flank is most important. As opposed to just knowing that you should flank, you need to know the signs of when a flank is going to be successful, how to prevent yourself from getting flanked upon, and all these factors can make you a better player. So let's jump into the first big core topic. So now that you know that flanking is really powerful and you know that there are risks to flanking, I'm going to tell you how to get the powerful aspect of flanking without or trying to minimize the risk. So the first thing that you need to understand about flanking is flank timing is the most important. The reason that flank timing is important is you really need to be flanking when enemies aren't easily prepared for you. The reason that flank timing is so important is if you go at the wrong time when your allies need you to be putting frontline pressure, you're going to allow your allies to be killed. Let's say you start a flank when a Reaper and a Doomfist is coming into your backline and you're McCree. You might be able to get a pick on the enemy support, but your whole team's gonna die in the process. That's poor timing. Timing is really important, and I'm gonna break down some of the timing aspects of it later. But really be thinking, if you are often going on these flanks and not getting the value that you want to, even though you feel like the flank is going successful, even though you don't get scattered out, enemies aren't camping for you or things like that, you're getting kills and maybe your teammates are still dying, or maybe you're not getting enough value to carry the team fight, maybe your flank timing is off. Now, the second big thing that you need to understand is that the more consistent you are mechanically, the more likely it is that you'll get value out of a flank. So even if you're flanking on a support, let's say you're flanking on an Ana and you want to get a fat nade. If you can hit the nade exactly what you want to, then you're going to more consistently get value out of that flank. The thing about the mechanical skill aspect of it is if you're consistent mechanically, you can execute this game plan. Because what a flank is you have a very small window of time to get as much value as possible without the enemy being able to react to it. This means the first shot on McCree, you want to make sure that that connects every single time, and you really want to make it a headshot every single time. The nade needs to connect because you're not going to have another opportunity. Especially you're not going to have another opportunity because you already used your nade. But if you want follow-up shots or things like that, there are tons of examples of if you're more mechanically sound, if you can hit those entry-level shots, you're gonna get more value out of your flank. And this also leads to cascading effects where you can go on a flank, get a kill, and lead that into more kills, which I'll describe more later as well. Essentially, this concept is all talking about the window of time, and you need to understand that after timing of when you go on a flank, you need to maximize the window of time when the flank actually starts, and you want to make sure that that starts really smoothly. It's really easy to tell in the first couple seconds of a flank whether or not the flank is going to be successful or if it's going to be a failure. Now, let's move on to some other questions that you might have about flanking. So a big question about the timing aspect is, when should you flank? So there are several big points. Now, there's a lot of different variations, but these are the big points that you really need to think about. When you're not needed on the front line, we talked about that before. When there is pressure on the front line and the enemies cannot focus on their back line. This is where your tank and support and other DPS are all pushing aggressively, and the enemy is so focused on the front line that their situational awareness is at an all-time low. Because they're so focused on your front line, they're not going to be ready for that flank to the side, that off angle, that cheeky nade, that flashbang McCree. They're not going to be ready for that. The third and final time, which is an extremely risky, and this one can only be executed if you're really confident in your mechanical skill, and this is to turn a losing fight. So the reason that you do this is usually if you have an ultimate or some high impact ability, and you could see it all the time where a Widowmaker would take a risky flank, and the enemy will be pushing it aggressively, completely tunnel visioning, trying to clean up the Widowmaker's team, and the Widowmaker will use that opportunity to get multiple kills. You could see the same thing with a Reaper Death Blossom. You could see the same thing with McCree's High Noon. Turning losing fights can be valuable, yes, but at the same time, you want to make sure you don't stagger. So if the fight is lost and you can easily get in position to try to turn a fight, definitely don't be afraid to go for it. But these plays are not going to be very consistent unless you have a certain level of confidence in your mechanical ability. Now let's move on to a really big aspect of flanking in general, which is soft flank versus hard flank. Soft flank is a flank with options to retreat back to safety or back to your team. Some characters have built-in flank protection in different ways that can help soft flanks be more successful. Let me explain. So a soft flank would be something like peeking just out of natural cover on an off angle from the enemy team, trying to get in a few shots. Whether you hit the shots to get the kill, or if you don't, you're basically fishing at this point, and you can definitely retreat back to your team. Now, there are some characters with built-in soft flank protection. Let me explain. Let's say you peek out the right side as something like McCree. You can shoot the enemy a couple of times, and whether you get a kill or don't, maybe you get a kill on somebody, but the rest of the team want to come and pursue you. McCree has built-in soft flank protection because once he goes out of LOS behind natural cover, it is extremely risky for a lot of characters to pursue McCree. Because of his flashbang and his ability to burst down close range targets incredibly fast, it is dangerous for any character to pursue McCree. Let's say you flank the enemy and you two-shot an Ana, one headshot, one body shot, and then the Tracer comes for you and you roll behind natural cover. She could chase you, but there's always the potential for you to flashbang her and kill her again. And then guess what? You can re-peek the same angle, and there's two less players that can actually punish you, and you could probably hard commit. But before we move on, there's a lot of characters that have this soft flank protection. Something like Hanzo's Sonic Arrow is a great one. If an enemy tries to push you in an area you could Sonic, that means that you could turn the tables a lot easier because you can one-shot enemies and you have informational advantage. Now, let's move on to the hard flank. And what hard flanks rely on is going all in and confirming multiple picks, ending fights quickly. This is more risky and it relies on mechanical competency, but it can hard carry some fights. Let me give an example of a hard flank. This is something like dropping down on the enemy team, flashbang, fan the hammer, a support, rolling backwards into open area, and taking a 50-50 with somebody. That is an example of a hard flank. If you pull it off, you're going to get 2 kills and you might even win the team fight, but it's risky. You're putting yourself in a position that you can't escape from, and you're basically saying, I'm going to hit my shots and win the matchup, or I'm going to die. I'm never going to be able to retreat. You basically remove the option of retreating, and that's why this is really risky, and I would shy away from this typically. I think this is a far less consistent way that people flank, and I think that it's the way that most people complain about when they say, my Roadhog always flanks. So yeah, that's because he's jumping into the enemy team, or he's playing in open area, or your McCree is jumping into the enemy team. Now, hard flanks can be valuable, but I think every single hard flank should typically start as a soft flank. Let me explain. If you peek that angle, that natural cover, and you two-shot that Ana, then you can identify the enemy and see what they have to stop you. Maybe they're still not even completely focused on you. You can decide to turn a soft flank into a hard flank. Well, instead of rolling back to cover, retreating to your team, you roll out of cover and try to confirm even more kills on reeling enemies. And that's a hard flank, and that's something that you have to practice. Start and maximize the soft flanks first before you start experimenting with taking these really all-in hard flanks. And then the last point of the video. This is the last and maybe the most important point of the video, but I definitely have to tell you, sometimes you should just not flank. I know that I tell you flanking is really powerful. I know what I say, it's one of the best ways to carry people in ranked, but sometimes flanking can just throw a team fight. If you make a predictable flank, if you flank consistently throughout a game and the enemy develop an understanding of your habits, they could punish you so easily. And then you're the one that gets picked. Basically, while you're making a flank, you're just throwing your life away into the enemy, and they got a kill on you, and they didn't even have to flank. They didn't even have to give up their positioning, and they still got a kill on you. It's important to understand that the harder the flank, the more you give up your positioning. The farther you push to make a flank successful, sure, the more unsuspecting it is, and hypothetically, the more potential it has, but it also makes you vulnerable. If you're flanking all the way behind an enemy, there's no way you're going to get peel from your allies. There's no way you're going to get heal. And you need to understand that. If you plan to flank, if you plan to do soft flanks, which is what I would suggest you start with, try to keep in mind how far away your allies are. Try to keep in mind where your exits are. If you can go back to your allies after an unsuccessful flank, then you didn't lose that much in the process. If you get punished and you get killed, then you probably shouldn't have flanked at all. And it's up to you to identify when you could get successful flanks off, or when you should simply just not flank at all, put forward pressure, regular pressure, and just be that consistent source of damage, because that might be what your team needs. Anyways, I know these concepts are sometimes really difficult to understand, but if you want to see high quality, in-depth flank guides, definitely go check out GameLeap.com. Right now we have a special sale going on where you can get your annual membership at $3 per month. So if you want to master this concept and see in-depth Grandmaster examples, definitely come check us out. You won't regret it. Anyways, that's all I have for you today. Any other video concepts you want me to make for the YouTube channel, please let me know in the comments down below. I'm Coach Mills, and until next time,